Yeah, no, half hour later.
Yeah.
So it was on mute.
So today we're going to have like a little question and answer with Sydney, and this will be posted for the Half Noon News on Friday. So I'm just going to start with some questions. So you are Canadian, but you grew up in Florida, right?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit, just briefly, about how you grew up and how'd you get into swimming, how all of it.
So I started swimming only because of my older brother. So my brother and I are almost 3 years apart, and I basically wanted to be just like him in like every way, shape, or form, where it was like if his friends were playing tag, I wanted to play tag, or like he wore that shirt, so I'm gonna get that shirt.
That's
which like
awesome.
wasn't the best thing from my parents sometimes, but so we just started summer league swimming together, and just like kind of at our neighborhood pool, and we would do it from like May until July every summer. And then kind of when I was 9, I realized I really liked it and wanted to start doing it year round.
Yeah.
And so I kind of did softball, swimming, and soccer all together for like a few years, just because I loved sports and wanted to do a bunch of different ones. So that's kind of how I came into like my first club, and it was the only club I swam with until I went to college. And so I was there from the age of 9, and then kind of taking it really seriously at around 11.
Okay.
And then I was there until I went to university at A&M.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you've been at A&M this whole time, or no, you went back to Canada for a little bit, right?
So I graduated in my last year of swimming for the university was 2019, but I did one more year of college for my 5th year in 2020, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to leave towards the end of 2020 because in Canada we were strict in quarantine for multiple years after the US completely opened up. So in order to compete at my Olympic trials, I would have to quarantine 2 weeks no matter what. And so it kind of only made sense for me to go up at the end of December, like kind of around Christmas, where I would normally take like a few days.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the only thing that fits for a break. And I just moved there ever since. And so I was there for almost a year and a half, 2 years, and then I've been back at A&M for about a year now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
so a little all over.
And now the U.S. Olympic trials are like weeks before the Olympics, but the Canadian Olympic trials are different. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So our trials usually is in around early, mid-April.
Okay.
And that's how we are always have been, even for trials for other meets. So also for like World Championships, Commonwealth Games, Pan Ams, all of those have always done that kind of trials, which I think has its pros and cons. And as we've shifted before and had kind of like a Pan Packs we've done similar to the US, where it's you make the team and then you kind of go straight from there
to camp.
and I personally love the April time frame. I like being able to kind of set for trials and then reset instead of kind of going straight through it, but that's just kind of how it's always been since I started swimming for them in 2012.
Okay. And you just had trials recently. How did you do?
It was the best I've swam in probably 5 years.
That's awesome.
It worked out really well. I mean, I really couldn't have asked for more. I qualified in the 3 events I wanted to qualify, and so just taking it as a stepping stone for the summer.
That's great. So what are your summer plans back at A&M?
Yes. Okay. So back at A&M, I live there, train there full time, so I'll be there until about mid-July, and then we'll kind of head over to Japan. And so I really just have World Championships, and then this summer is kind of a longer summer where Pan American Games is also in October. So this is the first time kind of long course season will stretch out that much, but I have those 2 meets.
Okay. And what are you swimming? You said you qualified in 3 races. So 2 IM, 4 IM, and
200 breaststroke.
200 breaststroke. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Awesome. And you were telling the kids this morning that you were like really at first like maybe a backstroker kind of. Tell us a little bit about that. Like how did you find your race and all of those things?
So my first team that I ever qualified for was in 2012 of Junior Pan Packs in the 200 backstroke, and I think my club coach still to this day says it's my best stroke, but it might not be my fastest stroke.
But technically it's your best stroke.
Yeah, and so that was the first time I kind of made a team, and then the next year in 2013 Junior World Championships, I ended up getting 4th in the 200 back, and I remember just like being so angry at myself. I know I've always been my harshest critic and still am, but at that point I remember talking to my coach and saying like I was supposed to medal in this event, and he was like, you still have the 2 IM left, like
It's not over.
It's not over. And that was my first ever individual international medal was the 200 IM. I ended up getting bronze. And kind of from then I shifted. I was like, just because it might not be my favorite doesn't mean it won't be my best at a meet. And so kind of since then I've been a little bit more on the IM side.
Got it. You just mentioned something that I always struggle with as a coach. So you said I'm my worst critic, right?
Yeah.
Really hard on yourself. I feel like the highest performing athletes that I've worked with were all like that.
Yeah.
When you were, let's say, like 3 stages, when you were like a kid, like younger, not high school yet, in high school and then in college, what did you need from your coach to help you work through those emotions? Maybe what did you need from your coach and your parents to help you not like dig this negative hole and, you know, I mean, it's tough. So as a coach, what can I do to help an athlete like you?
I think one thing that was like the biggest part of even starting swimming was I did a lot of sports until I was 11, which even some days I would say is early, but that was when I fully committed to swimming.
Okay.
And so at that point, I remember that was the first time my mom ever kind of made me a decision. And obviously now I know it was more of a financial decision to kind of do one sport. And at the time I was in my softball uniform and I'm like, what do you mean I can't go to practice? And that was kind of the first time our mom's like, we need to make a choice. And I know to a lot of it, she wishes she didn't have to make it that young, but you know, things happen, and that was where me and my family were at the point. And so that was kind of when I decided to choose swimming. And from then on, my mom let me kind of dictate my own path of whether I wanted to keep swimming or not. And my mom was very involved in a sense that she wanted me to do well, but if I said the next day I wanted to be softball, like she would let me switch in a heartbeat. And that was, I knew I always loved sports and it's what I wanted to do. And that was really important that she kind of let me have my own like which way I was going to go with sports. And at the end of the day, it's really hard not to realize that sport is just sport. The whole reason you do sport is for fun. Like, thank God I get to make it a profession, but that's not everyone's role. And so my mom let me kind of dictate which way it was going to go. And her relationship with my coach was between her and my coach, and my relationship with my coach was between me and my coach. And she always would say to me, if you want to quit swimming, that's great, but you need to go tell Randy. And I was never going to do that because she knew that it was something that also I had to process myself. And not in a way that she didn't want to help, but she said, this is your decision. Sport is supposed to be fun and you make your choices. So that was really important. But also from the coaching side, my coach always made sure I had a lot of opportunities, and mine looked different for another swimmer because of my dual citizenship. And so I didn't know I could swim for Canada until he knew my mom and met my mom when I was about 12 and said, like, does she have Canadian citizenship? And she's like, yeah. He's like, you know, she can swim for Canada. And my mom's like, I have no idea, like, nothing about it. And so since then, he really told me, like, I want you to swim for Canada, one, because you're going to get so much more opportunity at a younger age. And that was also something that my coach really put on me, was just because I was in the age group to go to younger kids meets, he pushed me to go to bigger kids meets, because whether that meant I got first or seventh, he'd rather me get seventh against older kids than first against people my age. Because he looked at my entire career that age doesn't matter when you come to the Olympics. And it's hard to remember sometimes when you're younger, but he's like, if you have that position, you need to push yourself and be against the best, whether it's
your
training
age or
a guy,
older,
training someone with a different age. And so whether that came to practice, I was really the only girl that trained in my groups and club. And I always went to the senior meets, even if I was 14. And if I was able to and had that time, he pushed me to be my best in whichever way that shaped up. So I don't even remember the beginning of the question, but
how did your coaches and your parents support you through those moments where you were really, really hard on yourself?
I think
so, giving you the freedom to choose and handle the things your way. What was like a conversation in the car on the way home from a meet where maybe you didn't perform as well as you would have hoped? with your parents? And then what's the conversation at practice the next week with your coach?
I think the biggest thing is my mom would always ask, did you talk to Randy after a set or after a bad race or anything like that? And usually I would always say yes. And if I didn't say yes, she said, that's your first mistake, because if you didn't talk to your coach, you probably didn't learn anything.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is I've learned way more from every bad swim, any not so great swim, any missed opportunity, because they'll teach you way more than usually a great swim will.
Yeah.
And if you think having a perfect race is really possible, I would say most likely not, because even someone who's gone a world record and an Olympic gold medal, I guarantee you they can take something away from it.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing is my mom always told me to learn from my bad swims, and my coach would never shy away from saying it's a bad swim, but there would always be a process of what we're going to do next instead of letting that be that final defining moment.
Like a plan.
Yeah, and I think that's hard to do sometimes, but I think it also helped me cope with a bad swim more, because I'm also a very realistic person where I know things aren't going to be sunshine, rainbows, all perfect. And so being able to break it down and process it was way more beneficial for me and easier to deal with hard swims.
Do you still deal with them that way?
Yeah, I think, and I've tried to teach a lot of the girls that I work with now, is just trying to break things down into smaller tasks, because when you kind of just make a generalized statement, it's not really easy to obtain, where
I got to get better at underwaters, right? Like how would you, like you were talking to some of the athletes today about how underwaters are so important. So how would you break that down with one of your athletes?
And so like one of the conversations I have is like, how can you be better? And where they just say like, I can work harder.
Yeah.
And that's not really obtainable, where it's, I think the same thing that I've worked with even therapists where I'm talking about how to get mentally stronger is there's always that, oh, well, why don't you be happier? And it's like, that doesn't make sense to me, and my brain can't process that. And so kind of those generalized statements and like getting even better at underwater, it's like, okay, but how do we do that? And so whether it's on this set, why don't you go 3, 4, 5 kicks off your wall and try and maintain that, and trying to be more than that, and just trying to be a bit more efficient, where on this speed stuff, okay, how many kicks am I taking and how long is it taking me? And so kind of breaking it down. And I think that's why swimming is so great, because it is a sport like that, where it's not judged. It's not, will this be better or what? It's just like, no, it's a matter of fact. If you do this, this will happen. And so just kind of creating the steps and making a problem solved is kind of how my brain processes things.
That's cool. That's cool. Do you think that, first off, have you ever read Michael Phelps's books?
No, I haven't.
So the very first
I haven't
one,
even read Adam Peaty's, and he's my boss. So
really?
I'm not
You're not a reader?
Well, I am a reader, but more like rom-com stuff.
There you go. Okay, I like the young adult fiction. I'm reading a book right now with fairies, maybe. Molly's over there laughing at me. But in Michael Phelps' book, I'll never forget this. So, I mean, everyone, like, when you think of his swims, like, you think of him coming off the wall and having better underwaters than everybody else, right? Like, that's who I am. And, like, it just was a good reminder that everyone starts somewhere, and that you have to break it into bite-sized pieces, because he talks about when he was like 12 or 13, and him and Bob were like, okay, I think this underwater dolphin kick thing is gonna be a thing. Yeah. And so let's practice it. Let's do 1 kick off every wall. Yeah. And like Michael Phelps started by committing to doing 1 kick off every wall during every set at practice, and look where he ended up, you know. And it's like those bite-sized pizzas, like you have to start somewhere. And so I've just always thought that was a really cool perspective, right? Yeah. But okay, so next question. When you are at a meet, okay, when you like are really, really excited about your swim, and then it doesn't go how you want, what do?
I call that the false sense of pace, because sometimes before a meet I'll do pace and I'm like, oh my gosh, especially 200 IM pace, when you break it down, I'm like, I'm breaking world records.
Or
like,
the 2 fly pace, right? Everyone always feels so good on 2 fly pace.
It's just not always realistic, which I think, you know, sometimes I need to go fast to make it hurt a little bit. Like there's obviously its pros and cons, but I've had a lot of meets where my pace is amazing and I'm like, this is going to be the best race ever, and it just like didn't really make sense. And one thing that I feel like with Steve I've always talked about, and I feel like a lot of coaches say, is you don't have to feel good to swim fast. And I just
true.
don't think that anything is more true than that,
Yeah.
because there is that false sense of going into it, and even having that confidence and saying like, I've done everything I can, I have set myself up the best, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't define what you're going to do next. And I think it's really important to remember that, and in the moment you're not going to remember that at all, but taking time to process, okay, I worked really hard here, but it didn't seem to pay off the way I wanted to, so what can we put this energy into next? And I do think a lot of it's trial and error, and unfortunately with swimming there's usually 2 times a year that you get to trial it. And you know, there's different races where I've tried to find the importance of racing in season and see it's not going to be the best time for me. Like I do know that that's usually not how my body works, is going a best time in season, but it's okay. Yes, this was slow, but did I pace it the way I wanted to? And again, just always trying to take something away from it. But an important thing, even with my years in NCAA, the first race we always did was the 4x2 relay, and I always swam almost 2-3 seconds slower than I did at conference on that relay, and I don't know why. I have
Every year?
no idea until my last year, until my senior year. But my first 3 years, like, no clue. I just was way slower, and my individuals were still faster than
They
SECs.
had been at SECs.
So
Interesting.
And I think, like, for me, it was always really hard to swallow that and know I have my best events where I'm not a 200 freestyler. Did I do well for that relay and always want to perform? Yes. But I knew what was ahead of me and what I wanted to achieve was still there.
Yeah.
Which I think is also a beneficial thing of swimming so many different things. But trying to learn is, like, one thing that I always talked about with, like, my sports psychologist is I literally go and I shower off a race, and I'm like, this makes no sense, but in my head it makes sense. I'm like, I'm going in and I'm
a great strategy.
showering off my race. I'm like, there's nothing like physically there, but it was just like, okay, I'm gonna allow myself to feel this and accept this, and then once this happens, once I'm out of the shower, there is no
over.
thinking about it.
That's smart.
And that's one thing that I do always have to remember is, at the end of the day, you're gonna swim it again. I know that's not gonna be my last 2 free, and sometimes it feels like the end all be all, but you can probably sign up for a meet the next weekend if you really wanted to and swim it again.
How did that go with your teammates, swimming those 800 free relays? Like they're looking at you as like their team rock star, right? The superstar, and like that you didn't swim as fast on that relay, but then you performed faster for your individuals. Like, was that hard? I mean, knowing that
that was also a team joint that we all kind of never swam faster.
Really? Okay, so you were in it together.
So it wasn't necessarily just me, but also it was really difficult to see them not be able to handle it the way that I did. And
like emotionally responding.
Yeah, and I think that comes with practice, and I think I was very fortunate, and I take a lot of pride in the knowledge that I had going into college. I think because I've been swimming internationally before I had gone, I definitely had a lot more experience with the high pressure situation, and really you can't know how to dictate those until you've been there. So it's almost like I had been there before them, so I wish I could help them, and I can help it with them, but at the same time, until they process it themselves, it's not as easy to get there. And so it was really difficult. Like, my senior year is very difficult, where I would say 95% of our team didn't bounce back after their first race. And it's a tough pill to swallow, because swimming is an individual sport, and you can separate yourself and still do well, but it feels a lot better to do with your
As a
team.
team,
So it's this weird balance, but you know, I've learned a lot from it, and I feel grateful to be in my position with the college team now, that I can try and help them whichever way I can.
Yeah, that's great. So we recently have really started pushing our younger athletes, or our newly qualified athletes, to go to the highest level meet possible, even if they only have 1 or 2 swims, right? When we are out here in West Texas, it's really expensive to travel the amount that we need to. And so for a little while, we were like, well, we'll take you to this meet because you can have a full meet. Well, or even closer, right?
Yeah.
Like even just closer, where they can drive to it as
Right.
opposed to having to get on a plane.
Yeah.
But we have really started to shift our kind of mindset, and it's for this purpose.
Yeah.
Because taking an athlete to that higher level meet as early as possible to start exposing them to that experience is kind of like our goal there. What would you say to the athlete or the parent who's like, okay, we're going to go to this meet that Coach Jenna's asking us to go to, and we're going to have 2 swims, and we're going to spend $2,000, and we worked our whole, or the athlete, right? I worked my whole season, and my biggest meet, I'm only going to have 2 swims. Like, what would you say to that athlete and that parent just to like share your experience and how that is valuable and the right decision long term?
I think it's definitely a balance between the future, which is not easy to say, I think, to a younger kid sometimes, where in a parent's mind is, are they going to do this until they're 18? Are they going to do this until they're 12?
Or 26.
Yeah, and so it's harder to, I get where that conversation can be harder, which I do think is a conversation my mom had with me for a young age, where if I didn't get a college scholarship, I would be at a community college back in Florida, without a doubt. And even I will never forget my calls with Steve saying, like, I don't want to come to A&M if I'm going to fall in love with it and can't afford it, because I was in a position that I would pay my way through college. That was always my situation with my family. And so that was a conversation my mom had with me at a really young age, is not like, how serious are you wanting to take this, but it's just, what are your goals? Because I think it's important for kids, even at a young age, if they say like they want to win the Olympics, I think there's, to some degree, you have to take it seriously of whether you think that's possible or not. If they want to try, you have to let them try. And like I've said, until you're in those situations, you cannot understand how to emotionally deal with it. You can preach it as much as you want, blue in the face, say it to you. I can say it, you could say it. But a lot of that experience you will not get until you're actually there. And I mean, I can say it now, I do it with the college girls, where I'm like, you guys need to go to these meets and you need to see Olympic gold medalists on deck and see how they maneuver.
Handle themselves.
Where, like, I still learn now, and like I've said, Adam Petey's my boss, and I learn from him all the time of just how he composes himself on a pool deck. And I will take that in as much as I can. Am I going to use everything? No. But the kids going to higher level meets, they will soak it up like a sponge. They can soak it up way more than I can. And so there's a lot of value to it, but I get where it can be a fine line. But I really do encourage the conversation of goal, just dialogue between a parent, a coach, and swimmer.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit here. So your future in swimming, tell us what are your dreams? What are your goals? What if you finished your swimming career and you accomplished X, Y, and Z, you would be pleased? What is it? I
think it's changed a lot over the years, where I would have said selfishly at 21, I want an Olympic gold medal, I want a world record, and without that, I'll never stop swimming. And as I've matured and figured out, a lot of swimming is about timing. And, you know, I mean, the biggest example is the times that I went in college. If I was 1 year older, I would have been a national champion as a freshman. I never became a national champion, and I'm multiple seconds faster than anything that it took the year before I went to college. And it's a tough pill to swallow, because you always want to be your best, and sometimes your best on that day might not match up with the rest
somebody
of
else's
swimming.
best.
And that's okay. It doesn't take away the success that I had. And so right now, I think I am very happy to be in a position with swimming that I wasn't maybe 2 years ago, where I'm enjoying training and my environment and the mentorship that I get to do with the teammates that I have. And whatever that plays into as a quantitative goal, I'm okay with that result. And I think for the first time, even going to trials in April, I said to my coaches, is like, I'm enjoying this so much that even if I don't make the teams that I want to make, and even if I don't make the events that I want to make, like, I'm still happy. And I'd rather be in this position than miserable 2 years ago trying to get this one goal and think
Yeah.
that nothing else exists without it, because there's
Yeah.
so many different successful points in your career. And one thing always when I go into a meet, I always say, like, I want to go best times, because I think if I can be my best, whatever that plays out, if it's a medal, if it's seventh, I will be very happy with.
Yeah.
And trying to get to that position is not easy.
Yeah.
I don't think I got there until I was 25. So it's easier said than done. But of course, like, I would love to win an Olympics. Of course, I would love to have an individual medal. Of course, I would love a world record. And I'm going to do everything that I can to get there, and wherever that lies. And whenever I feel ready to kind of switch out of the pool and be more on deck, then I think it'll happen. But I don't know when it will happen, and I'm okay not knowing, because I think it makes it a little bit more sweeter while I'm still doing it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really neat. When we were, I think when Molly was actually like maybe 12 or 13, we had this T-shirt, and it was the moon and the stars one. Do you remember? It was
Something aligning.
shoot for no. It was shoot. Yeah. Yeah, don't tell me. Yeah, it was like, don't tell me, just shoot for the stars when
Yeah.
there's footprints on the moon, or
Oh
something
yeah,
like
that one. That sounds like something.
Yes, yeah, but it was like, I think that's a hard balance to teach
Yeah.
a kid to not have a cop out.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, like, I'm gonna say that I'm gonna go for a best time, but I'm also completely content and satisfied if I don't get a best time, because I know, like,
Yeah.
I was all in, right?
Right.
That is such a hard thing to teach and a hard thing to accomplish, because it's like, okay, but you've already kind of, sometimes an athlete will already give themselves this pre-excuse of like, oh, but I'm going to land among the stars, so I don't really,
Right.
like, it's okay that I didn't get to the moon.
Yeah.
Which, you want a kid to be happy with if they put in the effort, right?
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance of like,
I think a lot of it has come from reflecting on all my successes, of whether that's a medal or whether that's a best time or whether that's an in-season best. And like I said, trying to learn from things, but also I was never ever good at celebrating any success. And I had to learn how to do that as I got older in order
Yeah.
to stay happy with swimming,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, it is a sport. And when I talk to others that they're like, oh, what do you do for a living? I was like, oh, like, I'm an athlete. And they're just like blown away.
Yeah.
And they're like, that is the coolest thing I have ever heard. And sometimes it's nice to hear, because it takes you a step back from what you're doing all the time, where, like, my boyfriend's also an Olympian. I'm an Olympian. I train under an Olympic
Yeah,
coach.
that's pretty
and
cool.
it's pretty cool. And his sister's an Olympian. And it's really cool, but it's really not reality. Like, and it's hard to forget that sometimes, because the people that we surround ourselves, especially in this sport, is very unique individuals.
Yes.
Because it's a very time
special
commitment.
people to be a swimmer, right?
Yeah,
It takes
and
a special person.
it takes a lot of time, and there's not a lot of people around you that don't have the same mindset and the same goals,
Right.
which I think is an amazing thing. But it's nice to step away that's not always the reality.
Yeah.
And so being able to reflect, and I think that's been part of my journey of reflecting on my successes, is because just go talk to someone off the street that has nothing to do with swimming and tell them you won this meet. They don't know if it's the States. They don't know if it's the Olympics. They will think, oh my gosh, that is me. And it really is.
Yeah.
And I think, and it's hard to not compare yourself and think that, well, this wasn't really that big of a meet. But like,
Yeah.
even for me, I went to Futures last year.
Yeah.
And if I told my great aunt that I won Futures, she'd be like, you're the
You're
best.
amazing.
You're amazing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might sound silly, but you have to like reflect on that and
Yeah.
find purpose in it and find happiness in
Absolutely.
all of them.
Yeah, that's great. I think as a coach, that's one of the strategies that I take with my athletes that are really, really hard on themselves. I have
Yeah.
a young man that I've just started working with, and it's like he gets out of the water, and I think I've seen him genuinely smile one time after
Yeah.
a race, and it's like everything else has been like oh, well, that flip turn was awful. Like, I should have done this on the start, and this, and this, and this, you know? And it's like, okay, but we got to find something to celebrate.
Yeah.
We have to find at least one thing
And that's something
to be
that,
happy
like,
about.
and working with Steve Boltman for so many years is I will genuinely get out of a race and be like, oh my God, that was so bad. And I come over and he's like, good. Did you see that turn? And I'm like, okay.
That was
and
a pretty good Steve
Yeah, I do a pretty good
impersonation.
Steve. But like he genuinely, as a coach,
Finds the good.
yeah, and it's not like I've ever had the conversation to be like, I need you to hype me up. But like
Yeah.
he knows, and even before a race, there's so many times where I'm like, just tell me I'm gonna be okay. He's like, you're gonna be great. And I'm like, okay. And like and sometimes that's all you need, and like
Yeah.
sometimes you verbally have to hear it, but I don't know how he does it sometimes, because I would not want to coach me in a lot of times, but he's done a pretty good job for now almost 8 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, if you could just share one last piece of advice with let's do 3 categories. Okay, one piece of advice for our coaches, one for our swimmers, and one for our parents. What would it be?
I think parents, my biggest advice is create a communication with your kids. And I feel so grateful. My mom is my best friend, and communication wise, I don't talk to her every day. But the thing is, when I was growing up and having the relationship with swimming and having the relationship with my coach and teammates, we would always speak about it. It was never a not figuring out. Like, she would always help me talk it out. But when it came to my decision making and what I was going to do, it all came down to me, because like I've said a million times, it's a sport. It's supposed to be fun. And so my mom has never hindered anything that I want to do. And my mom's also made things work a lot more than I genuinely don't know how she has. And like in positions in my family of, my mom wasn't someone who was at every single swim meet. I started traveling to Dubai when I was 16. She wasn't
Yeah.
going to come watch everything.
Yeah.
My mom has been at an Olympics, and that was only because of friends and coworkers that helped her go there. And
That's awesome.
was I ever not going to be able to do it without my mom? No, because she's instilled in me that I can always do this on my own, and it's my own path and my own situation. And so she's never not been there to support me, but whether she could be there physically or not, it wasn't that she had to coddle me and be on deck with
Yeah.
me and take me to practice all the time. My mom was so excited as soon as I turned 16 and I could drive myself to morning practices. She didn't want to be there because it's my own sport and it's my own
Yeah.
identity that I wanted to create, and she allowed me to create. And I think kids, especially nowadays, I mean, they grow up way faster than even when I grew up.
Yeah.
But giving them the ability to have the trial and error and create that communication and dialogue, I think, is really key.
Yeah.
I would say swimmers, my biggest advice is say your goals out loud, and I hope they scare you. And I think it's hard sometimes to want to tell your friends what you want to achieve. But if you surround yourself with the right people, they're only going to want you to be the best that you can be. And if there's a friend that's telling you you can't, I would try and find other friends, I would suggest, because surround yourself with people that want you to be the best and want you
Yeah.
to achieve everything you want to achieve. And I was definitely not a kid that watched an Olympian and said, I want to do that. That was never really me, but I knew I was good at swimming and I knew I liked to work hard, and I was like, let's see how far this can go. And my goals changed every year, and I don't know if I ever wrote down on a poster that I wanted to be an Olympic gold medalist, but I know in me that I want to do that. And I was like, let's work together and figure out how I can get there. And then my biggest advice for coaching is, I know this, and I've grown up with old school coaches, old school, and I grew up with a very, very tough coach, and I am very grateful for that. And I think sometimes it's hard to want to be really tough, and I think there's a fine balance, but there's a way of always being tough and knowing it's because you want to get the best out of them. And as long as you lead with the intentions of showing them how much you care and how much you're invested, they're never going to want to let you down. And I think that was one thing that I had with my coach is, if I am not doing this for me, I'm doing it for him because I know how much they've put into it. And trying to find a way to teach that to kids is not an easy task, that's for sure. But I think that was a big thing for me with my coach. And even to this day, he doesn't coach me, but I still don't want to let my 11-year-old coach down. And because they believe in you. And I think trying to instill that and show them, and even verbally telling them how much they believe in where they think you can go, I think it's a good idea to share with kids and say what you believe in them and what you think they can achieve. And I think making it more realistic, hearing it from someone that whether you think they do or not, they definitely admire you, and I think it goes a long way.
That's cool. I recently told one of our younger female athletes that I think she could make the Olympic trials.
Yeah.
And I think I freaked her out.
I think it's good to freak them out sometimes.
Yep. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences and your knowledge, and we really appreciate you coming out to Midland. And I know Molly has learned so much swimming with you the last 5 years, and
She better.
She has shared some of those lessons with our kids already. So thank you.
Thank you.
For
I'm
that.
really happy to be here.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a good one.